Hey, welcome back to the Sagey Bard podcast, where we discuss business, finance, health, wealth, and social issues with a unique perspective.
All right, there it is, guys. Welcome back. Guys, we have a very sensitive topic today, so we're going to jump right into it. Sagey, you were telling me a story about an afro. Tell me about the afro. Tell us about the afro.
You know, so I attended college about 1,300 miles away from home, where I grew up in Oregon. Mm-hmm. And where I grew up, I was really excited about going to college in another place. Mm-hmm. And the first couple of weeks of school, I came across an afro. I think it was in someone's room. Mm-hmm. And I said, hey, can I have this? And he said, sure. It was an afro wig. And why did you want it, though? I'm not to interrupt you, but why did you want it? Well, why did you ask him? What made you ask him? I was in a totally different place. I had a way of reinventing myself. I was 17 years old, and you know, I thought it was really cool.
Okay.
Honestly,
you wanted the afro. Okay.
I thought of Dr. J. I thought of a bunch of other political activists and different things that I've seen in magazines, mm-hmm. and I was always interested in social issues, and so for the first couple weeks of school, I wore an afro for nearly 24 hours a day. I mean, I had it on when I went to play basketball. I had it on when I went into town, which was a small town of about 5,500 people, and up there in central Alberta, they thought I was black, so it did. Actually, a person once at a coffee shop said, "Is that your real hair?" I gave her this look, kind of like a Mr. T look, and she was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." So,
she thought she offended you.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into I want to talk more about the influences. So you said Dr. J. What about Dr. J?
Well, I mean, he was an amazing basketball player, and you know, he was a little older than the basketball players I paid attention to, which were still, you know, Michael Jordan, Clyde Drexler, and those guys, and they had a different hairstyle. But there was something that was always kind of appealing about the afro.
About the afro.
Yeah.
You know, and it's interesting. Let me just interject. And you know this. You're aware of this. You do a lot of reading. You understand a lot of things about African American culture. The afro was symbolic, right?
It was absolutely symbolic. It was symbolic.
So for you kind of, what's interesting to me is when you were telling me the story, you sort of picked up on the political symbolisms of the afro, which I find very interesting. But you found the afro to be cool.
I did. I found the afro to be amazing.
And I think, you know, for me as an African American person who can grow an afro, I think this is really cool to hear someone finding the afro cool. You know, it's pretty cool. So more about the afro. Let's. All right. So that's why you like the afro. It was political. I think African Americans need to hear this. I think it's cool that, you know, you adopted that a little bit, and you know, you knew it wasn't your hair, but you were just having some fun because you thought it looked good.
Yeah.
Now, let me get into another question. Well, real quick, so you're up in Canada. You had a situation you were telling me about where the police stopped you. Tell me about that in your hair.
Well, this was actually my sophomore year of college. Mm-hmm. My sophomore year of college, there was a big ice storm in eastern Canada in Quebec.
Okay.
So in Montreal, there were a bunch of farmers, other people in Quebec that were affected, and they were trying to raise basically money and supplies for people who were actually freezing to death. There were animals and people freezing to death out in Quebec. And so at church, we made an announcement for people who were going to be volunteers to go into town and then collect donated blankets and clothes for people to use to,
try to stay warm.
To try stay warm, because the power grid had been knocked out, and they were going to fly those supplies out of Red Deer later that night.
All right, so you ran into a cop. So what happened? How did you meet the cop? What happened? Were you guys speeding, or what happened?
No, what happened is I ended up in a group with three other people of East Indian descent. So two of them were Canadian East Indians, and two of them, including myself, were American.
Okay.
But we ended up going to a part of town, and we went through, actually, I didn't. I was not able to walk because I just had surgery on my knee.
Okay.
So there was a bunch of ice on the ground. It was about minus 25 degrees Celsius. So that's probably...
Nice, mild. Nice.
Yeah. It was probably minus 30.
25 Celsius. So minus 30 Fahrenheit?
Yeah, minus 30 Fahrenheit. It was very, very cold. And obviously we had... I had my big Washington Redskins starter jacket on.
Oh, starter? You used to wear starter?
Yeah.
I had a starter jacket back in the day, too. I can't remember.
My friends all had, their jackets on, and they had snow caps because, well, it was bone chilling.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So what ended up happening is they had gone to 7 different houses, according to the cops. They knocked on 7 houses by the time I parked a little ways up the street and walked or limped back down the street to them.
Oh, because you had surgery. Why were they knocking on doors?
We were trying to get donations for people who were freezing.
Gotcha.
We were trying to just knock on doors and say, hey, you know what, this happened. If you have anything that you'd like to donate, we're going to be packaging these and sending them out on a plane tonight.
Gotcha.
And what happened is the police said 5 of the 7 doors that they knocked on, none of these people had opened their door.
Okay.
But 5 of those families had called the police.
Wow.
So
friendly.
the RCMP showed up.
And what's RCMP?
Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Mounted Police, okay.
So by the time I arrived, and I'd limped back about half a mile to my friends, there were 3 cop cars around them.
Interesting.
And actually, before I got there, a cop had pulled up right next to me, and he said, "Are you with those guys down the street?" And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean, what guys?" And he was like,
"Those colored guys."
That's actually what he said.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
He said, "Those colored guys down the street," and I was like,
Interesting.
I don't know. I said, if you don't, I don't know what their names are, so there could be a bunch of
could
people.
be Bin Laden down the street. Who knows? Why are you asking me? What are their names? Let's start with that.
Precisely. So what he says to me is, "Get in my car," and I was like, "I'm not getting in your car."
Right.
And he's like, "Okay, well then follow me." So I said, "Okay." I jumped in my friend's car and followed him down the street, and that's where
he let you follow him. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting tactic. Okay, keep going. I'm sorry.
That was where my friends were surrounded by. Once this guy got there, there were 3 different cop cars.
Do they have their hands on their guns?
By the time I got there, my friends were surrounded by these 3 cop cars, and the cops were yelling at them, and they were saying, I still remember, he said, "What would you do if we came to your town and we were doing this?"
I'd give you some money. Here you go. How much do you need?
Well, and I asked him, unfortunately, I've always had a mouth on me, right? And I said, what do you mean by my town or his town? I was like, this guy grew up in this town for 19 years.
This is his town.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, this is his town. And what he says is, well, we're going to get Officer Jazz over here to rough you up. Okay?
He said that, rough you up.
That's what he said, rough you up. Officer Jazz is going to rough us up.
Interesting.
And
Jazz, that sounds very... Anyway, let me move on.
Yeah. So
very fruity.
What ends up happening is he says, "Well, let's check your hair." And I said, "Well, what does that have to do with it?" So he has them, my friends, take off their hats, and I mean, I refuse to do it, but they took off their snow caps so that he could run his hands through their hair to feel the texture of their hair, because then I'm guessing the assumption was that we were
Vidal Sassoon.
It's actually VO5. It was only
VO5. Okay. Let me feel your hair real quick. This story's weird.
It is weird. It is weird. And I remember saying to him, I said, "So what do you mean? Like, would we have to put powder on to walk around in this town?" I mean, like, I'm just really trying to understand what's going on here, and I'm really frustrated because we are there trying to help
Interesting.
French Canadians.
Right. We're here to help you, and you want to feel my hair? What's wrong? What's wrong with you? That's insane to me.
Anyway, so what ended up happening is they gave us a warning, and that was that we had to leave that neighborhood.
That's illegal, but anyway.
So, but let me tell you what's even more perplexing or fascinating with this. The next street over, my sister, another one of my friends, so you had 2 or 3 Indian girls, along with a Ukrainian girl and her cousin, who was driving them. So basically 4 girls, 3 of them were East Indian.
Did they feel their hair too?
They got the most donations of any other group. Of any group that went out that day, they got the most donations.
The cops are donating to them?
But so then it highlights the difference of what...
Stay out of my neighborhood.
Well, it highlights in a lot of ways the feelings and the sentiments of black males,
right,
and how they feel threatened by law enforcement, whereas females oftentimes don't.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, so we're not really... Okay, so that's interesting. That's a really interesting story. I actually want to... You know what I'm going to do? What we're going to do? We're going to tag the Royal Canadian... What year did this happen?
This was in 1998.
You remember what month about?
January or February. I think it was January.
We're going to tag the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and we're gonna tag you guys, and we want you guys to see this. We want to let us know if you're Canadian. Let us know in the comments if you've had any experiences with weird cops who want to feel your hair.
Well,
just
and
massage your scalp while they work. Go ahead.
I think that things have changed a lot since then. I mean, and that was actually the most direct encounter I ever had with racism, I think.
Yeah, that is pretty racist. And basically, they want to see if you're black. That's what they want to see, because they're racist. And anyway, let's move on.
But going back to what you were saying though about the afro, one of the things that I really appreciated when we're talking about the political elements of the afro and what it embodied. Growing up as an East Indian, you would always hear constantly about Gandhi, right? And nonviolent passive resistance. And I think those are great. I mean, it's great. It takes a very strong person to be able to turn the other cheek and, get punched out repeatedly.
Yeah.
Which is also Gandhi's who influenced Martin Luther King. However, I'll be honest, the message of Gandhi and King didn't resonate with me as a young man, and they still don't to a large degree.
Right.
And it's because of that aspect, like Malcolm X and the Black Panthers and like Black Power, which also gave a different meaning to an afro for me.
Gotcha. So this is really fascinating. Honestly, you're the only person in the world that I've heard say this. Guys, share this video. This is honestly amazing. Like, I've never heard anyone embrace the afro for its political and the fact that they think it's cool. I think that's really cool. I mean, it's a symbol, right? It's almost like the opposite, the evil side. Say, for instance, our skinheads, they'll shave their head.
Yeah.
Right. So they embrace that look. Here you are embracing this look, which is African, which is really cool.
And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things that I disagree with Malcolm X and Nation of Islam and and even Chandra Bose from Bengal, India. But there's a lot of things that they were saying in terms of we have the ability to fight back, and you don't have to just be a victim of whether it's the British or white Southerners, whatever it is. You can actually fight back. And there's different ways of doing it. I'm not saying that Gandhi's way or Martin Luther King's way they were great. They were great, but I think there's different ways which you can go back and stand up for yourself. Right.
Okay, so that's another topic that we could probably explore in our live today. We could probably get into more of the political, social stuff. And I think, you leading into that is good. We can probably get, when we do our live later on. By the way, we do our lives on Sundays around Pacific Standard Time, maybe around 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, right after lunch. And then this video, if you're watching this would most likely be uploaded on a Tuesday morning, typically 8 a.m. And if not, a little bit later in the afternoon. All right, so let's move into this real quick. So, is wearing an afro self-hatred?
You know, I didn't view it that way.
You're only 17 at the time, right?
Yeah,
So.
and I absolutely, you know what? Before I had completely white hair, I had black hair. You know, I've always generally liked my hair, even though it's prematurely gray. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I thought an afro was great. I didn't hate myself, and I didn't hate my hair for sure.
Okay.
So.
Oh, so you didn't hate your. So it was more of a. You just appreciated it. So it was something you wore on the side, just for its look, its aesthetic.
Yes.
That's cool. All right. So what about cultural appropriation? You know, today we have a chorus, a cacophony of voices, right? Who are screaming cultural appropriation for any time someone does something. Now, me being African American, I've noticed that the strongest, the loudest, the most vocal proponents of cultural appropriation tend to be my people, and it typically tends to be African American women for the most part, from what who typically start these conversations. Some of the conversations are over hair. We're talking about hair today. So, but they typically, it's rare that you see an Hispanic. I haven't seen a person of his, Latin descent charge someone with cultural appropriation. I haven't seen it personally. Some of the more notable stories have been from African Americans.
Let me tell you, my second year of college, we had these shirts, right? And they would have a slogan or something like that. And I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was something along the lines of, the greatest form of flattery is to copy.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Imitation is the greatest form of flattery.
Yes. Imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So when I look at a lot of these different things, for example, now you have people who get in trouble for, quote, wearing blackface for what they were doing in the 1980s, right?
Right, right.
And they were trying to imitate Michael Jackson, who was the most popular singer at the time.
You're right, but he was busy doing whiteface.
Yeah,
he did whiteface later on. He did whiteface later on. Yeah.
You have white people who were putting on blackface not to make fun of him, but to imitate him, because he was the greatest person they could think of.
Right, and then I'm not pushing back, but I have to include in the conversation that there are white people who do blackface to disparage African.
Correct, and that was especially more prevalent in an earlier form of comedy and entertainment from, probably the 1950s earlier,
right,
where they wouldn't even allow black actors, and they would have white people portraying black people.
Right.
Or if they did, it was always in a maid or servant role, which, again, might have been appropriate in terms of what you're trying to do if you're trying to make it historically accurate. But that being said, I view blackface and a lot of those things, at least from the era I grew up in, as imitation for the purpose of flattery rather than to put
insult?
Someone down. Yeah.
Right. A lot of it's insult today. So let's go back to cultural appropriation. Is wearing a fro, hindsight's 2020, looking back as an adult, does it fit the description of what people are calling cultural appropriation? What would you say to that?
100%.
Okay.
I would say it would fit the
definition of cultural appropriation. If you were to perm your hair, now this is funny because when I lived in Korea, I lived overseas for years. I did see. You guys Google this. Google Korean people with afros. They can perm their hair so it looks like African hair, and it's insane. I might actually put an image of this up, but you can Google it. I'll probably put one up.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I've actually while I'm talking about it, why don't you pull one up? Pull it up real quick. We'll show the camera. I've seen Korean women who were into hip hop culture. I've seen them perm their hair, and one woman comes to mind when I was in the city of Daegu, Daegu, South Korea. I remember I was out at a night, doing some night entertainment type stuff, and I I asked this, yeah, show the camera real quick. So I asked this, you can get closer to it if you want. I asked this woman.
Nah, that's not gonna work.
Like tilt it. So I asked this woman if she.
Nah, it won't focus.
All right, I'll put it on the screen, guys, so you guys can see later. So I asked this woman who I saw who had what looked like African textured hair. I was like, "Are you half black?" Because I was confused. I was like, "Are you half black?" And she goes, "No, I'm not." She smiled. She was friendly about it, and she said it's a perm. And I was blown away. I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, because as a black person, you're like, why would you want my hair? Because we've been told that our hair is not great, right? By white people who wanted to hurt us, hurt our self-esteem and that sort of thing, right? So for me as an African American, I was like, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to look like me? And it was a sort of an awakening. So what I'm starting to realize is, as a ethnic group begins to scale the social ladder in some respects, your features, hair, your phenotype, your face, your skin may become more appealing to those same eyes who at one point tried to disparage you. You know what I mean? Let's look at this. Here's a great example in the inverse. Renaissance. Look at the Renaissance period.
Yeah.
Pale skin, slightly chubby. That's what was in.
Well, Peter Paul Rubens, he made a career out of painting chubby women.
Chubby women. Okay, so there was a point where pale skin was in due to economics in Europe, in Western Europe, economics, and that's what was celebrated. And there was a point where we talked about this in a past episode about skin bleaching, but some women from Europe, not everyone in Europe has the same skin complexion. Some have in the Scandinavia. I met a couple people. I met a family from Finland, and they had a strong yellow undertone. They look like some Asian people.
It's really interesting because there are some genes that are shared between Koreans and Norwegians.
Did not know that. That's fascinating.
And that is one of the things that Gavin Menzies talks about in his book, 1421, The Year the Chinese Discovered America. If anyone is ever fascinated about really weird genetic markers and just a really fascinating story,
that's one of them.
That would be one of them.
That's fascinating. So what was happening was some women in Europe who weren't, Europe has a span of skin complexions, right? There were some women who were darker who didn't feel adequate, and they started to bleach their skin. They would do things to make themselves lighter so they fit within the white society. So, what I'm saying is, people try to fit in just based on power and the majority and what's considered beautiful, and the beauty is a moving target. It's a moving target. So anyway, go ahead.
Last week we talked about Rachel Dolezal, who is pretending to be black, and we said she's trans black or whatever.
Yeah.
But are you aware that there were a lot of white kids that when they were captured by the natives on the frontier in the 1700s, 1600s, the natives would take them and then dye their skin?
Did not know that.
Yeah, they would dye their skin, and then what they would do is they would keep on dyeing their skin every couple, like 2 months or so that they would look more native, because it was better for the kids' self-esteem
to fit in.
Yeah,
that's fascinating because, guys, once again, the name of the podcast is the Sagey Bard, and a sage is a wise person. The bard is a storyteller. Here we have some great stories, guys. Give us a like, give us a share, and definitely subscribe. You're going to hear a lot more interesting facts like this. I'm actually I'm learning. I'm getting an education right now. It's always interesting hearing your perspective and, getting a little bit of an education. We're about 25 minutes in. Guys, what we're going to do is we're going to move into a slightly different aspect. We're going to talk about We're going to talk about the juxtapositioning or the comparisons between Indian skin and African American hair. Stay with us. We will be right back. All right, guys, welcome back. Sagey podcast. All right, so last week we talked about skin bleaching. Yep. Every culture has insecurities.
Yeah.
What are some of the insecurities? Just to kind of recap, what are some of the insecurities in your culture that you can mention?
Basically, a lot of it deals with skin color.
Skin color.
Skin color.
Is there anything else that I'm not aware of that the viewers may not be aware of who are non-Indian?
Well, I know that there's accent, but
that's natural.
That's different.
That's all groups, right? Okay, so let's stick with skin color. With black people, it's skin sometimes, it's hair, it's lips, it's nose, it's everything. It's our whole existence sometimes, right? Now, I'm not, a lot of black people have healed and they're over that. We find the beauty in ourselves. When you're beat down for a couple hundred years and you're told you're ugly and this and that, you start to believe it.
About half a millennia for black people.
Right. You start to believe it. But then you start to see the beauty in who you are. And I think a part of this podcast, what we want to do today is we actually want to share who people, we want to share the beauty. We want to, show you that there is beauty. But we want to, before we get to the warm, fuzzy part, we're going to talk about Indian skin versus African American hair.
Well, there's a lot of similarities. I mean, there's a lot of parallels. For example, Indian people are always trying to change, not always, but a lot of them are always trying to change skin color. Mm-hmm. African people or African American people are oftentimes trying to change their hair.
Right.
Now, I think that what's really unique, though, from the little I know on this topic, is that it seems like it's mostly African American females that want to change their hair.
Their hair, yeah.
Whereas with skin color, it's oftentimes Indian men and women that are trying to change their skin color.
Right. It's really interesting. There was a sort of a paradoxical a component to this where in the 70s, Black is Beautiful movement, African Americans, there was a movement where, you guys remember this, there was the Afro women and men. I got pictures of my aunts who had, come up from Jamaica as teenagers, come here to go to college, and they were incorporated into the African American society, and even they were growing fros and fitting in and dressing the part. And they look beautiful. To me, they look beautiful with their afros, but it was a political thing as well as the Black is Beautiful thing. And something happened. I don't really know what happened, but somewhere along the way, men continue to keep their hair natural, African American men, and the women went back to straightening their hair. Yeah. There was a point where African American men and women were straightening their hair. They were putting things like lye and different things and pulling their hair straight. Sammy Davis Jr. If you go back to like the 50s and the 40s, you can see images where black people had straight hair.
Or Reverend Al Sharpton.
Sharpton, he's hanging on to it. He's one of the last holdouts. He's holding on, man. He believes in it. And it's funny how you could have a person fighting for civil rights embodying the straight hair. Well, I'm not a hater. And real quick, let me make this quick point before I forget, because I know you got something great coming. I don't have anything. There's nothing against you straightening your hair. There's nothing against you embodying different hairstyles. Let me just put that out there. But if you perpetually have straight hair and you don't allow your hair to exist, that may be a problem. That may be indicative of a problem. Okay, you were going to say.
Well, I think it's definitely indicative of a problem. You shared with me a trailer about a movie called Good Hair by Chris Rock, and I actually watched that just because I was fascinated by
research for the podcast.
Yeah, and honestly, until this week, I really knew nothing about weaves or hair straightening or anything like that. Right. And
did it blow your mind?
It absolutely blew my mind because in this video, they were talking about how some black women would fly from across the country to their hairdresser in New York to get their weave done or whatever, just because once you found someone that you trusted, you were willing to do anything for that. And these people were spending $5,000. There was one lady on there, I mean, and I must add, she was exorbitantly beautiful. Right? But she was saying that she spent, on average, about $180,000 a year on her hair. On her hair.
Wow, wow, wow.
And fortunately, she was an actress, so she was able to.
So she had the money for it.
But it was about, she said, on average, she spent $10,000 a month, at least on her hair. And since she changed her hair sometimes more than once a month, it worked out to about, she said, about $180,000 a year.
That's insane. Obviously, most average black women can't afford that kind of thing, but black women do spend more money on hair than anyone else in this country, probably in the world.
And I had no idea until I watched this, because the struggle of black women in this regard, and then what actually came up was that if you actually had your hair in a natural form, okay, and this came up in a couple of different ways. If it's nappy, they're not happy.
And that's what Chris Rock said that?
No.
That's a quote. Who said that?
There was another black person was saying
said
that.
Right.
It was a black male.
Right.
And what he was saying that in regards to is not the women being unhappy.
The men.
It was other people. So then they viewed it as something that had to be done in order to fit in societally. So then if your hair was straightened, then you were going to be happy, more respected and appreciated by white people. They were going to be happy. No. The white people were going to be happy.
Okay.
And they were not going to be afraid.
Interesting. Let me, before we continue, Sagey probably doesn't know this, but the term nappy is considered offensive to some people. So he is, just to let you know, he quoted an African-American person, but you know how it is. There's certain words, even if you say certain words, African-Americans get offended. But this is a term you didn't know. So
well, can you tell me actually on that word nappy, what does it actually mean?
It was a sort of a pejorative that white people ascribe to African-American hair. It's pejorative. It's an insult word, but it's like to Asian eyes, using the CHINK word to describe their eyes. Not a very nice word. But I'm not offended by it, but there are some people who are offended, and there are African Americans who use that term to describe their hair, and I don't personally think it should be used. I think you should probably use words like kinky. Okay. Kinky might be a more appropriate word, but you know how it is with political correctness. It's sort of a moving target. So anyway, just want to let you guys know, he was quoting someone, so don't get offended. He's just quoting. It's, this is what someone said in a Chris Rock film, okay? Anyway, let's move on. I got another question here. Now, we're talking about preferences, and you mentioned how white people would be happy, right? Because they wanted, they sort of wanted to change black people. Black people were sort of to them, how we felt was like an eyesore in a way. Like, oh, we're here, we exist. Okay, change yourself. Make yourself white. Change your hair. Now, there were some young men in one of the research videos that we watched who a girl was interviewing him. Remember, you sent it to me, and she said, "What type of hair do you like?" or something like that. And I like the curly hair. And when black men have a preference and a fetish in a way for mixed women and sort of the big loopy curls, right? So that's what he was referring to. And then she said, okay, well, what about kinky hair? She said, I think. And he said, no, I'm not, I don't want that. And she said, your hair's kinky. And he said, yeah, I know, but for women, I like it like this. So in a way, what's happening is our young black men are brainwashed. Let me look at the camera for this. Let me say it three times like Umar Johnson. Our young black men are brainwashed. Our young black men are brainwashed to hate themselves. And I believe that black men and their beauty preferences, even though we wear our hair naturally, most of the times it's short, a lot of times, some people are wearing a lot longer now, but because of our preferences, we are affecting black women. Okay, and I think it's wrong. And I think black men need to be re-educated as to what is beautiful and see the beauty in the black race, see the beauty in black hair, okay, and in black skin, brown skin, black skin, we need to be changed, okay? I'm healed. I like natural hair on black women. I'm healed, totally healed. I would totally date a black woman who had natural hair. Most black men wouldn't, and are proud to announce that and see no problem in disparaging black women who wear their hair like that. You probably didn't know this. This is probably shocking to you. You're probably getting an education right now. So I think our preferences, we'll talk about preferences. I want to switch it over to you here in a second.
Yeah.
So in East Indian community, do male preferences, like with the African American community, do male preferences harm or hurt Indian women and how they have to appear for men in terms of beauty?
I definitely think, there was a video you sent me on skin color where Chris Rock went to India, and I think it was Chris Rock. No, it might have been someone else, but where they show the preferences of men towards lighter skinned women. But in India, it's almost different because the women also are that way.
Yeah.
And it's extreme where there's, what was it? Something like $3 billion a year was spent on just skin bleaching products.
Skin lightening.
Yeah, skin lightening.
And I'm sure as the Indian economy grows, and it's going to grow here, all the BRICS economies are going to be shooting up here in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't really know that. But as America tanks and the West tanks, India and Asia are going to shoot up, Africa as well. There's going to be more money spent on that stuff because there's going to be more people who can afford to buy it. Are there any other things that you can share with us to help us learn? Any other things that Indian men may put on as a prerequisite for Indian women that would say, okay, this is the only way I'll date you, or something like that?
Well, I think skin color is probably
Number
one, and then there's a bunch of other things related to, how much money you're making, your profession, or religious caste. But those are
externals.
Yeah, those are outside of what we're talking about here. But skin color is, really important. I think on that video you sent me where they would define their skin color. Are you wheatish? I don't even know what wheatish exactly is.
Interesting.
Then you have dark, light, and then how light.
Right.
So
we had a paper bag test in America. You remember that for Black African Americans? Paper bag was about the colors of that box.
No, tell me about that. I don't know about that.
Okay, so the paper bag, brown paper bag, if you could hold up, well, we can imagine what a brown paper bag looks like, right? It's like a tan color. If you were African American and they would do the test, brown paper bag. Here's me doing that, here's the brown paper bag. If you were darker than that, you were out. There's certain social circles and even jobs and things like that you couldn't get. It was crazy.
Was that by white people imposed on black people, or
I think
black people?
I think it was, forgive me for my ignorance on this, guys. I don't remember exactly because I don't pay attention to that kind of crap, but I think it was white people who started that.
Wow.
And then I think black people, because the engine was on, we kept the engine on and stepped on the gas, and we made it a thing. We made it a criteria for beauty. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I'm a little bit shaky on some of the details on how it started, but I know it was a thing. And today there are some black people who still apply these sort of tests to women in terms of beauty.
It's really heartbreaking when you look at some arbitrary things that you have no control over that are still imposed not by other people, but by your own community on itself.
Right.
Like, for example, in that video, they were talking about some of these children that were a year and a half old, where parents were taking them in so that their daughters could get their hair straightened. And
a year and a half.
A year and a half. So then what the beautician was actually talking about, and she said, if you do this, I can't remember the name of that chemical. It's like sodium.
Yeah, I forgot the name of the chemical. Yeah.
But the main ingredient in this relaxer, what they were describing is something that basically made your head feel like it was on fire. And you saw what it did to that soda, the aluminum can. After 4 minutes,
destroyed it.
The aluminum can was completely dissolved.
Right.
And that's what you're putting on your head. Right. And what she was saying is it could cause irreversible hair follicle damage to these little girls. So they're hair production could be forever altered.
That's interesting. You know, guys, we're going to get into some other stereotypes and some other later videos of different ethnic groups. For right now, we're talking about ours. But this sort of thing is pervasive around the world for other insecurities. What about this? How do we reframe our concept of beauty so that kids are not impacted in the same way we were? How do we do this? What do you think?
You know,
I got some ideas about this.
I think it has to start with, like, for example, Disney might be casting black females in more lead roles, but and again, I haven't watched the latest Little Mermaid and some of these other movies, but maybe they need to do that and then show them with their natural hair, so that it's not just a black female or a black male, but with some kind of, I mean, it doesn't happen with black males, but with black females, where their hair is not altered.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to see more positive images of black women, because here's the thing: black women in general, will do anything for beauty. Beauty is everything for women. For men, it's money, but for women, it's beauty. Beauty is their currency, and men can affect how women feel and what they do. If all the men end up liking certain body parts in a woman, let's use your imagination, women will go and put silicone in their body to make it look a certain way so that they'll be more appreciated by men. And it's not far-fetched to say they'll do the same thing with hair. They'll go to great lengths, traveling across the country, spending thousands of dollars to look a certain way.
Well, we're talking about women who oftentimes have very blue-collar jobs that are willing to spend thousands of dollars a year on just their hair. Okay?
Wow.
So then when we're looking at this is exploitation on another level. I mean, and again, it depends on your perspective, but you're having a whole bunch of Indian women that are donating their hair to a temple. Okay?
Yeah.
And just to give you an idea, this temple where they're donating money to, in terms of revenue as of 2009, it was pulling in more money than any other church or entity other than the Vatican.
The hair business?
Yes.
Wow.
And that money was coming from largely black females.
Fascinating. Guys, we're going to get into a business of section here in a little bit where we're going to talk about the actual business of. This is a nice intro to it. Yeah. All right, so we need powerful examples. In Indian culture, I would say the same thing. I would say that I think what the West, it's funny how the West is helping to cure this problem. In the West, we appreciate darker skin.
Yeah.
It is what it is. We love tan or darker Indian women. I love brown. I love Simone Ashley. Simone Ashley, if you're watching this, reach out to me. She may have a husband. I'm just saying. But I love.
For those of you who don't know, she's the main actress in Bridgerton for the second season.
Yeah. Call me.
Which is funny that you find her so attractive because, again, she was viewed as being relatively ugly by the Indian community. And they didn't understand why she would have been cast in that role because of her dark skin.
And here's the thing. America, with its influence, can take a beautiful brown-skinned Indian woman like Simone Ashley, put her on TV, and put more of her carbon copies and then change, because of our influence here, change culture worldwide.
Yes.
Make it acceptable. That's what we need to do. And I love it. And I love that she's there. She's beautiful. She's stunning. And please bring more. Bring more. Come to the United States. And more of you.
You know, and that show is actually kind of interesting because it does show black females with natural hair.
Interesting. I've never seen the story. I've never seen the show. Which is funny because I'm a fan of Simone Ashley. I've never actually watched the show. I don't watch a lot of TV.
Yeah.
But I know who she is.
And the queen in the show is black.
Interesting. Didn't know that.
But she's got a wig on all the time, so you don't see it. But I mean, it's kind of, it would be normal because everyone had wigs because they all had lice back then in England. I mean, so.
All right. Let me. Okay. So I'm gonna. There's a concept here. I think trying to figure out how we segue into this number 2 right here. I forgot exactly how we were going to make this, but yeah, let me skip that for right now.
Well,
I might find
when you look at skin color, like for example, a long time ago, a friend shared a book with me when I was thinking about working in Taiwan. And the name of the book was called Half Baked in Taiwan.
Okay.
Okay. In this book, Half Baked in Taiwan, it says at the beginning of time, God basically was in his heavenly kitchen or bakery, right? And he
was it a gas oven or?
It must have been a gas oven,
okay.
right? So he had a bunch of dough. He took the first batch, he formed it into little humans, put it in the oven, and then pulled out the first batch, and he was like, "Oh man, I overdid it." And that was the darker skinned people, black people, Indian people. Whatever, right?
So God made a mistake.
God made a mistake.
Is what people are saying. The perfect God made a mistake.
At least according to the Asians.
Got it.
So then the second batch he put in, formed the little people, right? Pulled it out. Oh man, he didn't put it in for long enough. Those turned out to be the underbaked people, maybe the Irish and white people, Scandinavians. I don't know.
Man, he made another mistake.
Yep. So then the third batch.
So he just kept the mistakes, basically.
Yep, he kept the mistakes.
Okay.
Third batch he puts in, he pulls it out, and they're this golden yellow brown, which is Asian people. And he's like, I got it just right. So he finally hit his Goldilocks moment, right?
So instead of just keeping those people and perfecting that recipe, he kept all the mistakes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so then, when you look at
God.
this from the idea of the center of the earth, or a lot of different Chinese ideas, there were a lot of people who were laborers. And if you had darker skin, it meant that you were a laborer. And I think a lot of that mindset has come down even to the African American community or black community. And the Indian community. So if you have darker skin, it means you're in the sun, you're exposed to the sun longer, you are lower class because you are a laborer.
Yeah.
Whereas if you had lighter skin, it means that you got to have a more cush life inside.
Right.
And you weren't doing the manual labor. And so you might have a better education. You might earn more.
They obviously haven't been on Instagram lately with all the beach photos and everyone traveling, because the game is totally reversed.
Well, no, and that's the thing. When you look now at a bunch of, let's say, old Orange County women, right? A lot of them have really torn up skin because they were trying to get darker.
Yeah.
And they now have skin cancer.
Unfortunately.
Or they've had multiple.
Which isn't funny, but
or they've had multiple episodes of skin cancer.
Yeah, they're multiple bouts.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're gonna let's move to the business of. We're gonna take a quick break. When we get back, we're gonna be talking about the business of beauty, the business of beauty in terms of all of this. Okay. We will be right back in a second.
Well, welcome back, and now we're going to be talking about the business of beauty. And this is where we'll ask actually some provocative questions in terms of the morality of different things, but also they might be different things that if you didn't care about some of these questions, you could invest in and make a bunch of money because they are expected to grow. And I don't expect that Disney or a lot of other media are going to change their beauty standards in the next few years.
No time soon.
So there are opportunities here.
The beauty standards actually, just in general for the United States and the West, it actually benefits the majority in power. It benefits white people, right? It solidifies it. Things like when you see white Jesus, it's some of it's very, very toxic and propagandistic and very disheartening when you see certain things. But do they have? This isn't necessarily a question we have to necessarily answer. It could be rhetorical. Do they have a responsibility to highlight our beauty? I mean, they put Simone Ashley in, which is awesome. Thank you, white people, for doing that. But they appreciate our beauty. White people appreciate the beauty of Indians. White people who are healed of their hate. They appreciate the beauty.
I think from the business side, I think you're going to sell what the market is desiring. So when we look at, for example, in Good Hair, Chris Rock basically said, when he was at the Bronner Brothers convention, which I had no idea in Atlanta. They had a whole convention for hair products
Yeah, makes sense.
that was catered to African Americans, right? And what he says is that all of these companies that were started by black people were systematically bought out now
Interesting.
by Korean companies, Chinese, and white American-owned companies. There was only 4 major companies that are still black-owned.
Let me say this. African Americans have a reputation for selling successful businesses and not producing for their progeny. A lot of black people are angry at the fact that BET, I don't know what the latest news is on BET, but I know Tyler Perry is starting to, I think he bought one of the black magazines. Don't quote me on any of this, but look it up. But there is a movement to reclaim some of these black icons.
Is BET not owned by?
It wasn't owned by black people. I don't think it is. And I think someone is trying to buy it and keep it black, or it may have been purchased recently. I haven't done any recent research on this. And I could look it up right now, but I'm not. You guys can look it up. But let's see. So let's talk about the money in the industry. I got the figure of $9 billion.
Well, that was $9 billion in 2009.
In 2009. So
I mean, now we're 14 years later, and in 2009 we were in an economic depression. I mean, now we might be entering another one, but my point is, if it was $9 billion in 2009 with a much smaller economy going into the Great Recession, it might be significantly higher than that today.
Yeah, we don't have any numbers on it, but it's $9 billion is an insane amount of money on hair, man. Because other women don't spend this much money on hair.
No.
Other women are wearing their natural hair. You know, Dennis Sperling, he's an attorney down in Texas. He sent me a clip of an interview he did where, and you know, guys, this is very sensitive, but you know, he's talking to an African American woman, and I've actually made this point to people before I watched that Dennis Sperling clip, but he said other women, because there are a lot of apologists in the Black American community who make excuses for the self-hate. Okay, I'm gonna look at the camera. I'm gonna say it one more time. There are a lot of apologists in the African American community who make excuses for self-hate. There are very euphemistic things that are mentioned as reasons why, and we can contrast this side by side with East Indian culture, where you have people who will use things like, oh, I need to make sure my skin's even, and they're applying whitening cream religiously. But they're not the only ones. There are black women in Africa. I heard in Uganda this is a thing, and all over Africa where they are, and in Jamaica where my family's from, who are bleaching their skin. So we have the same issue, but we have that plus hair. And it's sad. So back to the point I was making about Dennis Sperling, just a second. What he was saying was, other women they're putting in weave that looks like hair that comes out of their scalp. Whereas African American women are putting in hair from India. And I asked Sagey the other day on the phone while we were prepping for this, I said, dude, don't you think it's strange? I mean, now that you know that there are all these black women walking around, and the way I say it sounds sort of disparaging, and I am sort of disparaging it because I think it's weird, but I have to be sensitive because people are sensitive to how they look, their appearance, and they want to fit in. This is what it is. You want to fit in. And I think fitting in this way is a very apparent insecurity and weakness. I think when I look at you as a black man, I see an inferiority complex in terms of your hair. And I don't want to see that. And I'll compare that to other when I see black women with natural hair, my eyes widen. I get excited. I see a black woman who's strong. Okay? I see a black woman who's healed. And I want everyone to be healed. But I understand there are forces acting upon you, telling you you're not beautiful. And some of those forces are black men who are damaging you. Yeah.
The thing is, I think you have to start not only with black men, but with black moms. Because a lot of times they were interviewing, Chris Rock was interviewing this little girl, I think she was 5. And she just finished telling Chris Rock, it hurts so much for me to have this hair straightener in, right? And then he tells her, he said, well, I've got a daughter, she's 3 years old. Should she get her should she get her hair straightened? And the little girl says, yeah. And he says, why? And he says, because that's what you're supposed to do.
Wow.
And
that makes me so sad, man.
The little girl is sitting by, I think, her grandmother when she's being interviewed. So she's sitting beside her grandmother, and all she knows is that's what you're supposed to do. So then you have to change what moms are teaching their daughters.
Yeah.
And
that's true.
Based on Chris Rock's interviews and looking at all the men who were sitting there while their wife was getting a weave or girlfriend, and all of these men who were saying, you absolutely cannot touch, I can't touch my wife's hair, I can't touch my daughter's hair, you don't touch black women's hair. It's off limits.
Ah, man, it's an obsession and it's unhealthy. I want us to heal, and I feel bad. Even doing this conversation is going to upset a lot of people, but guess what? It needs to be said. It's just very simple. It needs to be said. We need to. Black men are healed. We're wearing our hair naturally, and we would like. But actually, black men are partially healed. Black men are a part of the problem. They are reinforcing the beauty standards, the Western beauty standards, on African American women, and it's not fair. It's just not fair, and it's messed up. And the thing is when you compare, it's like when you see a black woman with weave, you know it's a weave most of the time. And it just doesn't look as good as the woman who has straight hair. And I think a black woman's natural hair is her glory. It's how God made you. And what speaks strength, what speaks power to the young kids who are watching you more than you having a beautiful crown of African hair? I look at images of black women from yesteryear when their hair, and it's beautiful. It's pride, and it symbolizes strength. And I really like it, and I appreciate it. What were you going to say?
It was interesting because Chris Rock, he interviews Maya Angelou, right?
Okay, yeah.
And
I love her.
He's like, well, when was the first time you had your hair straightened? And she said, I think I was about 70. Right? And he says, so you live your whole life? And she was like, I'm still alive. And I mean, but her hair looked great, and it always did.
She's such a great person.
Yeah. It was fascinating just listening to the whole conversation, because honestly, I had no idea that this issue of hair was such a
big deal.
A big deal, yeah. I mean, I can see how it's traumatic.
For sure, it's definitely a lot of trauma there. We definitely need some healing, and I hope it comes soon. I hope we see more and more black women in media wearing their hair natural. Find different natural hairstyles that are natural, that you can wear, not just dreadlocks and stuff like that, but natural. You guys, you know what I mean, ladies. Go ahead and criticize me in the comments. It's going to help our video. Number 2, is it immoral to place insecurities in other ethnic groups for profit? Let me say this. I was over in Asia. There were black women who were going to Asia telling Asian women they didn't have a butt. I know we're talking about hair right now, but I want to point this at you black women for a second. Why would you do something to another race of people that was done to us by white people? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Why would you go put an insecurity in someone? Now let's step it up a notch. What do you think about companies that capitalize on these insecurities, and they know these people are suffering, and they're just there to make money. Is it immoral for people to do that?
I think it probably is. I don't think
it's not illegal.
It's not illegal.
It's not illegal,
No.
but everything that's not illegal, abortion is not illegal.
Yeah.
People are chopping babies up all the time. So just because it's not illegal doesn't mean it's not immoral. So let's get that distinction straight. But so yeah, what do you think? I think, okay, let me give you my opinion real quick while you're processing that. I think it is immoral. And I think there's a reason why Johnson & Johnson and a lot of these, and Garnier and a lot of these companies,
L'Oreal,
there's Lever. I think there's a reason why they don't promote those skin bleaching products in the United States. Even though they could have a good market here. There's a lot of Asians here who would be happy to use it. Lots of immigrants here. Yeah. Tons of people from Asia already use this stuff.
No, and you make a valid point. And that's why you don't find those products at Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, or Walmart.
Right.
Those products are typically found at ethnic stores. But there is a huge market here. A huge market.
If those companies wanted to make billions, they could, because they're making that money in those Asian home countries and in Africa. So they could definitely make money, but they don't, because they're afraid of the backlash. And there has been some backlash about some things. So black people will speak up. It's fascinating. You know, we're partially healed. You know, with the hair, guys are healed, but guys are inflicting self-hate on black women. Totally honest. All right, let's move on. Should businesses that cater to insecurities be allowed? Well, that's kind of similar to the other question. Let's move on. I'm going to say this, just to kind of wrap up this session a little bit. Money talks, and it has a loud voice. I think we're going to get into this today in our live, but I think that when people have money, this kind of goes back to the influence and how we can cure things. When people have money, they become influential. We know this. And this is how black people have, in the last 30, 40 years, have become more influential. A lot of black wealth has been created. And as a result, one of the litmus tests that sociologists use to test what's happening in society is they look at the interracial marriage statistics. It's one of the most raw data points you can look at. So they look at that. And sometimes the interracial marriage statistic can tell you how another race, in particular they use white people as a constant variable because they sort of determine culture and what's accepted and stuff like that. So they'll use, I remember I looked at some statistics on this 20 plus years ago. The United States, 80% of white people were against interracial marriage. And when they usually talk about interracial marriage, it's between black and white. And we're going to talk about interracial marriage in another episode, but I'm throwing this out there in terms of money talks. In Canada, it was the exact flip. It was 80% were okay with it, white people, which, you know, history of slavery and stuff like that, it's different. Canada's different. So I was looking at those two data points. And then when it came to, and now when you look at it, I don't remember the exact numbers, but something like 70, 80%, I may be wrong on this, but a lot more white people are accepting now of interracial marriage. So it shows you how images on TV, whether it be sports, media, a former president, can change the perception of people. So I think it's so money talks, money creates
money and success. Like when you show people like Ben Carson, Barack Obama, you know, people who
Oprah
you look
Winfrey.
up to. Yeah. Michael Jordan. Huge influences, and it changes people's perspectives. There's a quote, the poor is hated by his neighbor, but the rich have many friends. I think this is true. This is actually from the Bible, guys. It's from the book of Proverbs. I don't remember the verse. You can look it up. The poor is hated by his neighbor, but the rich have many friends. It's true. Smartest man in the world, according to Scripture, according to the Bible, said this. And I've thought about this over years in a sociological way. And poor people hate each other, and they're fighting, and they call each other names. And they commit crimes against each other. But everyone loves rich people. Everyone talks about rich people, no matter the race, doesn't matter. And that's how you break down barriers. So now, if you look at hip hop,
what's one of the main things that... All right, hip-hop, let's just say this real quick. Hip-hop is the #1 listened to music in the country right now. How did hip-hop rocket up to this way? What do you see in the videos? People throwing up money. Cash. Yeah. I'm rich. Brands. I'm going to quote it again. The poor is hated by his neighbor, but the rich have many friends.
You make a valid point, because even if you apply that same idea to Indian unity, India, even 30 years ago, was just a bunch of different states. It's become a country, at least from my perspective, more so because of the tech boom. And with the tech boom, you had like the Indian Silicon Valley in Bangalore, or the Indian Silicon Valley in Hyderabad. Then you have like all of the people moving to Bombay for Bollywood. But all of these things have basically forced Indians to mix with other parts of people from other parts of the country, and then create a national unit or identity, because you start worshiping money instead of whatever multitude of gods you're looking at.
Money's the new god.
Because you say, oh, well, you know what? You're a software engineer. That means you're doing well.
Right.
So maybe you're from a different status caste, but it doesn't matter that much because you're going to be rich.
Exactly, exactly.
And the worship of money is relatively universal.
It is, and that's why that quote makes so much sense. All right, we're gonna wrap up, guys. So let's move into our let's do our daily stupid.
Okay.
Let's do our daily stupid, and then we're gonna go ahead and close it out, guys. We will obviously this is gonna air on Tuesday, but we're gonna move into our live where we're gonna discuss some of this a little bit more and sort of branch out, have it a little bit more casual, and we'll give you guys an opportunity to go ahead and chat with us live online, and we'll see your questions. Okay, we will be right back in a second.
How dare you!
So we've got our daily stupid today, and I've got one that will definitely lower your IQ.
Get ready to lose some brain cells, guys.
Man in intimate relationship with his car in tears as it's written off after an accident. So this man, identified as Nathaniel, was in love with his 1998 Chevy Monte Carlo. So the man said that he had an intimate relationship with his car as they went on long journeys together, with the episode showing him lavishing more love on his car than any man has ever shown an automobile before. Okay?
So is this technically? So he's American, right?
He's American, of course.
And the car's American.
Yep, it was a 1998 Monte Carlo, Chevy Monte Carlo.
So some people would be happy at least he's dating an American.
Yeah. So he was definitely dating an American, but this guy says that he fell in love at first sight with his car, and
that's important. First sight's important.
Yeah, it's really strange, but this guy should probably hang out with the Japanese man that we mentioned, who had the $22,000 dog suit, and wanted to get walked around.
Yeah, and petted.
Yeah.
So he falls in love with his car. So now, you mentioned that earlier you were telling me that he referred to the car as a he?
Yeah, Chase.
So the car is called Chase.
The car is named Chase, and he refers to him as a him.
Interesting. So this is technically a gay relationship.
It is.
So, okay. But interesting. So this is literally an L for the LGBTQ plus community in a way. Yeah. It's an L. It's a loss. It's a giant loss. This is not a win.
He says, unfortunately, Chase is no longer part of my life. I think about it a lot. It breaks my heart.
That's so sad.
that he's not here. He said of losing a car during the episode.
That's terrible. All right, and obviously that was a joke about the LGBT. But, I mean, you could add C to it for car, or A for automobile.
Yeah.
But, nah, I'm just joking. But that, you guys, laugh about it, but it is kind of funny. But
he says he might never love a car in the same way again.
Aw, poor guy. Well, hey, at least the car wasn't underage. I mean, it's a 98. At least it wasn't underage. All right. All right, my daily stupid. Man breaks into Florida church, baptizes himself. Okay, he immediately feels sorry for his sins, baptizes himself. I didn't know you could baptize yourself. That's awesome. Is that in a normal world we'd call that going for a swim? Or going for a dip. Baptizes himself before stealing money. So he baptizes himself and then he steals money. Man, so would you have to baptize yourself again after that?
You would think you would have stolen the money first and then baptized himself.
Yeah, steal the money first, then baptize yourself. So, all right, so this happened in Florida, Panama City, a Georgia man. So, I guess he went out of state to do this. I guess the churches in Georgia weren't good enough. A Georgia man who broke into a Panama City beach church, Panama City Beach Church, had an unusual encounter in the baptismal. That's the little pool where you baptize people. Bay County Sheriff's deputy said. His name is Derek Porter. Derek Porter used a cinder block to smash a window at the Emerald Beach Church of God. And get in, a woman working at the church heard the sound and fled. Smart. Deputies added. While inside, Porter caused approximately $8,000 worth of damage to the church. Wow. Porter then loaded several electronics, including a television and a computer, into his truck, along with the church's money bag. That makes sense. You might as well get the money while you're there. Deputies and officers with the Panama City Beach Department descended on the church. I love that. Descended. And arrested Porter. They said they found meth and drug paraphernalia on him. That makes sense now.
That makes sense.
That totally makes sense. All right. Anyway, guys, you got any comments on that? On Derek Porter and his...
Well, I wonder how Derek actually baptized himself.
That's fascinating. I want to...
Because I would think that maybe he just was a homeless meth addict who jumped into a baptismal tank because there was water.
And then just a quick bath.
Yeah. And
that would make more sense.
Yeah.
I wonder if he did the entire, well, your friends and family stand up. Anyone witnessing this event? And I baptized myself in the name of, I wonder if he went through the whole thing or if he just did a dip. Anyway, Derek, if you're watching, if you're out of prison, leave us a comment. Let us know how that felt, how you managed to do that.
Yeah.
All right.
I really believe that, Derek, you're being made fun of.
Yeah, we're definitely making fun of you. All right, guys, that wraps up our Daily Stupid and our podcast. We're going to wrap it up. Guys, definitely like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell to let us know, to let you know when our videos pop up. And guys, as always, thank you for your support. And as always, we will see you in the next one. Thank you.